The lost colony of Roanoke. 115 people vanished and left only one clue. In 1587, Sir Walter Raleigh sponsored an expedition to establish the first permanent English settlement in the Americas. 115 men, women, and children sailed across the Atlantic and landed on Roanoke Island, a strip of land off the coast of what is now North Carolina. The colony's governor was John White. Among the colonists was White's daughter, Eleanor, and her husband Ananias Dare. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to the first English child born in the Americas. They named her Virginia Dare. Within weeks of landing, it became clear that the colony needed more supplies than they had brought. The relationship with local indigenous peoples was tense after a previous expedition had committed violence in the region. Governor White reluctantly agreed to sail back to England to fetch more supplies, leaving behind his daughter, his newborn granddaughter, and 112 other colonists. He promised to return within a few months. What followed was one of history's most consequential delays. White arrived in England in November 1587 and immediately began organizing a relief expedition. But England was at war. The Spanish Armada was threatening invasion, and Queen Elizabeth had seized all available ships for the defense of the realm. White was prevented from returning. When he finally managed to secure passage on a small vessel in 1588, the ship was attacked by pirates and forced to turn back. 3 years passed. It was not until August 18, 1590, Virginia Dare's third birthday, that White finally landed again on Roanoke Island. The colony was gone. Completely, every building had been dismantled, not collapsed or destroyed, but deliberately taken down, the timber removed. The settlers' belongings were partially buried as though packed for a planned move. There were no graves, no bodies, no signs of violence or attack. The fort had been carefully demolished, and on the main post of the entrance someone had carved a single word, CROATOAN. On a nearby tree the letters CRO were carved. No cross, a distress signal they had previously agreed upon, was present. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, today known as Hatteras Island, and also the name of a friendly indigenous people who lived there. White was optimistic. He believed the colonists had moved there voluntarily, perhaps for safety or resources. He sailed for CROATOAN Island immediately, but a severe storm prevented him from landing. He was forced back to sea, and his ships were eventually carried to the Caribbean and then back to England. He never reached CROATOAN. He never found the colonists. He never saw his daughter or granddaughter again. Subsequent expeditions that explored the region in the early 1600 found no trace of the colonists. Stories from indigenous peoples described encounters with light-skinned, English-speaking people living among various tribes in the interior of the Carolinas. Some stories described gray-eyed indigenous people in the region, suggesting intermarriage with the colonists. Others described a massacre. None were confirmed. For 4 centuries, the fate of the colonists of Roanoke has been the subject of continuous research and continuing mystery. In 2020, historians and researchers re-examined a 1585 map drawn by John White himself, now held in the British Museum. Using light analysis, they discovered hidden symbols beneath patches that had been glued over parts of the map. One patch concealed what appeared to be a symbol indicating a fort or settlement in the interior, far from the coast. This finding suggested the colonists may have had a planned secondary settlement location, and may have moved there deliberately, not in desperation. Colonists of Roanoke disappeared 437 years ago. They left behind the word CROATOAN, a carefully dismantled settlement, and a mystery that has outlasted every investigator who ever tried to solve it. Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, disappeared with them at age 3, her fate unknown. The most likely conclusion of modern researchers is that the colonists split into groups. Some moved to CROATOAN, some moved inland. Some were assimilated into indigenous communities, some may have died. But no single definitive answer has ever been confirmed. They are simply gone.